and welcome to this episode of Life in Him. My name is Pontus J. Back. I know we all have sometimes been confused about what's the right teaching, and we have Jesus Christ, and then we have Jehovas Witness. And here I met a brother in Florida who was really into the Jehovas Witness, but he gave his life to Jesus because Jesus is the only way, and Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So this will be something special for you to listen to.
My name is Joe Noach. I grew up in New York and, lived there for most of my young adult life. Moved down here, in my early teens, and, been here, for that amount of time. And I'm in the car business. Yeah, I work for Chevrolet, and I've been in the car business for going on 10 years almost. This coming year will be 10 years. It's been as far as, yes, I am a Christian. And have I always been a Christian? Yes. No. I was not raised as a Christian. My parents, when I was around 7 or 8 years old, became affiliated with the Jehovas Witness organization, which came to them in a point in their life which they really needed something. So they took to it pretty quickly and pretty strongly. And so from the time I was, 7, 8 years old till I was about 16 years old, I was part of the Jehovah's Witness organization. Well-behaved youth, no. I am one of four boys in the family. I was what they would call the black sheep. I was diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit with hyperactivity, so I was a lot to handle. For a mother having 4 boys, I was the case. In school, constant fights, issues with teachers, issues with submitting to authority. I had the head case, so I was the head case. At a young age, when I was still in New York, less than 10 years old, we were involved in petty things. We were, if the car was open, we were in it. And we were young. We were thinking it was cool to be living on the edge and on the dangerous side. We were into fire starting and just nonsense as kids. Drugs and alcohol didn't come into play till in my mid-teens, where I had fallen, so far. I was in the Jehovah's Witness organization. It's called disfellowshipping. I was disfellowshipped after being baptized for only a year for premarital sex with a woman that I was engaged to. I was about 16 years old, and by the time I was disfellowshipped, I was almost 17, and I had just graduated high school at 17 years old. It was shortly thereafter that I attempted to get in their grace, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of forgiveness, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of attention to me to try to keep me within the organization, or keep me, as far as being in God's grace, or show me that love and affection to help me on my way, being such a young age. I just didn't find that, and came to a point where I finally was just like, forget it. I was out, and at a very young age, I was, I moved out. It was kind of, decided on my side and my parents' side that I should go, because I wasn't living under their rules. I couldn't live under their house, and and I understood that, and I made it on my own. And where I was not having the attention of the friends that I had for years with the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, I then sought friends elsewhere, and that turned out to be in bars and nightclubs. And I was in and out of the bars and nightclubs at a very young age. So I was drinking and, smoking marijuana, and got introduced to cocaine before I was 18 years old. Was smoking marijuana from the time I was 16 years old. I was drinking excessively. Before the age of 21, I was consuming probably a fifth of Jack Daniels a day. And it was not recreational use. And then those led to other things. I led me to other drugs, and Went into my ecstasy phase and my acid phase, and those lasted me quite so many years. And I had no thought for anybody else other than myself. I had just myself to look out for. I was, pretty much cut off from my entire family. My parents, my brothers, being still part of the Jehovas Witness organization, was encouraged not to be involved with me for fear of their own livelihood in the organization. They went along with it until, later on in life, they decided that it wasn't the way to live, and that, they wanted me in their life. So, it was a rocky road, and I was not teetering on a fence. I was so far in the world that, if it had anything to do with politics or religion, I was running out of the room screaming, and I was like, I don't want to hear it. My fingers plugged, la 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 la. I was gone. My thoughts didn't even go that far. As far as how long I was going to live, I was thinking about the now, instant gratification, how I felt today, what I was going to do today. Tomorrow wasn't even a thought in my mind. Most of my days then bled into a single day. There were days where I would 3, 4, 5 days be up without even thinking it was all in a day. So tomorrow wasn't a question or a thought in my mind. It was all about now. I moved to Florida, in the 90s, early 90s. Most of my trouble started as with the group of kids in New York. As a young kid, I got in a lot of trouble and fights in schools up there, which bled into coming to Florida, and my parents, moved us to Florida to get us away from the nonsense in New York, and, to start a better life for us here. Needless to say, not having many friends. All my family and friends lived in New York. I was out getting into mischief, and that's when I really started to, get more involved with the Jehovas Witness religion. That's where I learned a lot of information about the Bible, and I started to change. And because I thought that's what everybody wanted of me, and I wanted to be a pleaser. And so I started to study the Bible. I started to study with members of that congregation. Came to a point to where I wanted to be involved more, and they said, in order to be more involved, you have to become a baptized witness. I didn't truly understand what that meant, to be baptized. All I knew was that it was a form of acceptance. And in order to be accepted, that's what I had to do. And I fell in love with a girl, and, the odds were against me. And, they pretty much told me, you don't have a chance if you're not a baptized witness. So I went and got baptized. And, wishing I knew then what I know now about what it meant to do a commitment of being baptized, I wouldn't have made that decision at such a young age. But I was involved with the organization for many years, and I was baptized, and then it wasn't shortly thereafter that, we fell into the temptation and, premarital sex. And it was, we had, brought it before them, and, with guilty conscience, and, we expressed ourselves, and we also expressed the fact that we were intended to be married. That made no difference, so, which, to this day I understand. But the way it was handled for me, and the process of the excommunication of the disfellowshipping was one that I found to be, even then, pretty extreme. I was pretty much embarrassed in front of every member of the congregation when they make an announcement like that in front of them as I'm present, that I am no longer a part of that congregation, and that my association as far as fellowshipping was to be nothing, that I am no longer to be associated with or spoken to, and that included members of the congregation and members of my family as well. I attempted to do what I thought was right, and, get right with, what I felt God wanted me to do at the time. And the only way I thought, that what I was being told of what God wanted me to do is to be present and basically take my lumps, and not having that association. That's part that's what they said. This is part of the tough love, so that you can understand what you're missing. And in that time, I went through a lot of personal study, a lot of personal thought on how to get right. But I didn't, being the Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't feel to this day that, they may have faith, and I don't knock them for their faith or their knowledge, but I don't feel like they have any spirit, being that I feel spirit-filled to this day. Now, I look back on that, and there was no spirit there. So the spirit of love wasn't shown to me in a way that I needed to be guided, and I needed to be, cared for as far as my spiritual needs. But I didn't feel like that was the case then. So my personal training led me to, just knowledge, book knowledge, but nothing of faith, nothing of spirit. Just, I got to know this stuff in order to get right. And if I don't know this stuff and I can't get right, then I'm nothing. So that's what I felt. And there came to be a point to where you have to go through a process in order to get what's called reinstated. And I went through that process 3 times. And in that time, the woman that I was with or engaged to be married, the engagement was broke off. That killed me and made me push a little harder to regain that. In that time, she was reinstated the first time. The first time she was reinstated, no questions asked. It was only a matter of, say, a couple of months. For me, it was multiple times of trying to get reinstated, and it was a process of over a year. And for being the age that I was and not being able to have any associations with the friends I knew for 7, 8 years since I've been in the area, is, it was hard, and I couldn't be with them, I couldn't do anything with them, I couldn't associate, couldn't even talk to them. So it came to a point where I was almost begging, and be like, I can't do this anymore. Well, we don't feel it's ready. The body of elders that were with me, I came to a point, and that's where I felt like I let my guard down, and I let the devil come in. And at that point, I said a few choice words to each and every one of them, most of them 4-lettered, and it was, I kicked out the door, and I never stepped foot in another church for years and years to come. I decided at that point that if this wasn't for me, then I would not have anything to do with religion or God at all. And that was pretty much the end of it. And at that point, it would seem like it was almost immediate that I made that decision, that everything that I ever wanted, as far as what I thought I wanted anyways, came to me. Multitudes of friends, all the attention of the women I wanted. The drugs and the alcohol followed suit because they all came to me. I gained instant popularity. I was into the music. I did a lot of writing and a lot of, I did hip hop and freestyle and reggae arts. And I had been doing it for years, but now it's taken a different turn. And now I started emceeing in nightclubs. I started writing my own music, performing with bands. And, it was a matter of no time that me at a young age of 17, 18 years old, and I'm in every club from West Palm Beach to Daytona. No questions asked. I started dealing drugs at a young age to support my habit. I made a lot of money. I made a lot of what I thought were friends. I dabbled in all kinds of, extracurricular activities, and none of it was anything that had anything to do with God or religion. I was so far immersed into the world, it was not even a thought anymore. And whenever it was brought up, as I said before, I would literally get up and leave the room because I just didn't want to hear it. There was the day I truly started to think about life in a different manner was the day my first daughter was born. She came into my life at such a great time that I was still full blown into, I was still selling drugs on the side. I was working a full-time job. I was still partying and, using and, just really living carefree. But when she came into my life, I really started to assess things a little differently because now that whole mindset of it's just me is no longer. And the family values that were instituted a long time ago with, my family, were still there. And I felt that when I came in, is that if it's no longer just for me, now she's in my life. So I started to really think hard about sobriety. And at that point, I realized that I was an addict. And as much as I didn't want to tell myself I was. I didn't want to give it up fully. I figured if I just tone it down, or if I just, cut out a little bit, instead of 6 days a week, was 5. And, it was even, that was, it was starting to decrease more and more in my life. I started separating myself from my suppliers. I stopped, moving as much weight. I stopped, and at that time, and I believe now that it's God's intervention, I started to see friends of mine overdose and die. I buried 3 friends in 1 year. I watched 2 friends of mine get convicted to life sentences, all within a period of about 24 months. And I started to realize that, man, I need to get out of the game. I need to get my head right. So I made it so. I started working harder. I worked 2 jobs. I still had my addictions that I was fighting, but I wasn't dealing. I stopped associating with a lot of the guys that I knew that were, so that way I wouldn't be tempted to, but I always had those contacts, so I always kept them in my phone, or so that way I know if I needed anything, I could call them. But, so about 2 years later, my second daughter was born, and, now it's really kicking in. In that process, between the time that my eldest daughter was born and my youngest daughter, my wife had been going to church, and she started going, and now I look back at it, I was such a bad influence on her, and that she had one foot in, one foot out. She was really trying hard to change our lives. It wasn't until, my oldest daughter was about, say, 3 years old. She came home. They were attending here at Common Ground, and my wife had been coming to Common Ground on and off when she was younger, and she decided she was going to come back in that time. So she came back, and she was coming back, and she would tell me, "You should come." Not having it. You should. She would always invite me. She would always tell me, "You would like it there." Not having it. You do your thing. I never stopped her. There was a day that I left the house. I was so stressed out about work and this and that I left the house, and I went out with the friends, and I got so trashed that it was one of those all-nighters, and I mean, the list of what I did could go on and on. Needless to say, my wife loved me through it. She didn't preach at me. She didn't complain or bicker. She just, gave me that look, and I knew she was upset with me, but so she, that morning I was still awake, and, she was on her way out to church. She didn't say anything to me, and she took my kids with her. And my daughter was going to the We Warriors here at Kids Church at Common Ground. They came home that afternoon, and my 3-year-old handed me a handmade cross. It said, "Jesus love you." And I'll never forget that, because I looked at her and I said, "Thank you." And she says, "Did you know Jesus died for our sins?" And I said, "Yes." And she says, "Well, how come you don't go to church?" And I looked at my wife like she put her up to it. And my wife was glowing, like she wanted to burst out in laughter and tears. And she says, "I had nothing to do with that." So I felt at that point like, the scriptures now started to come back into me where, when it said, "Out of the mouth of babes." And here's my daughter telling me, and I'm feeling already bad, and I'm hungover, and I'm feeling like trash. And that was the day. Then the very next Sunday was Mother's Day. So as a gift to my wife, I woke up real early. I cleaned the house. I got dressed, and I was still smoking marijuana at the time, and I was so stressed out that going to church, I had to smoke, and I did before church. And I went, and she woke up. She's like, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going with you." And so she didn't say anything about it. Got ready. Let's go. We showed up here at Common Ground, and I was welcomed so warmly. It was a little bit uncomfortable for me that people knew me by name, like they've been waiting for me. And, you know, again, here I am in a high state of mind. I'm like, okay, let's get this over with. I met a gentleman named Dr. Joseph Jennings, who, you know, a year ago this time, he passed away, who was a powerful influence on my life, because I heard his story and I read his book, and, you know, where he came from and what he was and what he did for the youth. It resembled everything that I wish somebody would have come and grabbed me from years ago. And he prophesied to my wife almost a year prior that the next time he was here, I would be with my wife here at church. And when she saw him, she about fell over. And instantly he came to her and was like, hey, and she remembered what he prophesied to her. And he's like, I told you. And she instantly remembered. Next time you're here, he will be here. So him and I, you know, we exchanged telephone numbers. We stayed in contact. I met some really great guys, you know, Pastor Brian. You know, I met Pastor Todd, who I thought was, you know, I can't believe this guy's a pastor. You know, I mean, your typical pastors, I always remember in the past, you know, and in the car business, I ran across pastors, the white collars, you know, when I met him and when I heard him speak for the first time, and I went, I didn't realize that there were churches that can be like this. I would think, you know, it'd be, you know, something that they get, you know, very preachy and didn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but this made a lot of sense to me. So I was compelled that day when he did the altar call. I stopped myself from moving multiple times. When he was calling, I fought it. And I felt at one point he looked right at me and said, come. And I had no choice. I felt like I was moved to stand. And here I am in front of people that I don't even know, still in my high state of mind, coming to the altar. And I just remember tears just falling out of my eyes. And I'll never forget the day. And then, you know, when they went in prayer, all I know is I bowed my head and then I turned around. I felt hands all over me, hands everywhere. And I've never felt more energy and more spirit and more love in my life, you know, as I did that day. And I was like, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. And I did. And, you know, I started to come to Bible studies. I started to get more back into the Word. I went back to reading the Bible. I started to clean up my habits. I quit drinking. I quit smoking weed. I quit, you know, and it was one thing after another. And the more I got involved with God, the more I felt like I was strong enough to handle it. I was able to walk away from my addictions without the need of rehabilitation. My rehabilitation was the church. You know, I got rid of a lot of the old associations. I got rid of, you know, things in my home, the music I listened to, the movies that I watched, you know, all the things that I had that reminded me of anything in the past were gone. I associated myself with strong men of the faith. I kept myself in the Word, and I found myself becoming a better person, you know, and for my kids' sake, for my sake, and my wife's sake, today, you know, it's the best way for us to live. Oh gosh, I entered the car business back in 2006, and you know, back then I learned from the guys that everybody tells you about in the car business. Guys that have been around for 20, 30 years selling cars, that know all the tricks, ins and outs. I did anything and everything I could to make every bit of profit I could for my own sake, whether that be lie, cheat, steal. You know, if I had to damage a vehicle to lie, we damaged a vehicle to get over it. We would throw keys on the roofs. We would not give keys to customers. We would falsify information to the banks. We would do anything to make a deal. And I learned this from the guys that have been doing it for years. And I was very successful, you know, and, you know, I was making money, and that wasn't a problem. I was making more money than I'd have ever seen as a, you know, real job. You know, I was working as a cook when I got away from selling drugs, and so I was working as a cook, not making a lot of money, but here I am with children. I found this car business, and they showed me, I'm going to show you how to make money. And it was effective. I was making money. I more than doubled my income in a matter of 6 months. And, I was like, man, I found a niche. It's a legal hustle. And that's what I was doing. I was hustling legally. Come further on down the line, as I got on my walk with God and, started to become a Christian, I had doubts. How am I going to support my family? Because I know I can't do the things that I was doing as a Christian. And so I had thoughts like maybe I should start looking for an honest job, because that's all I ever knew and how to do this business. So everything that I tried to find, it just wasn't the right job or wasn't the right amount of money. And I was already used to living here, when if I took the other job, I had to live there, and I wasn't ready to take that kind of a leap because I didn't fully trust God at that time. I was leaning on my own understanding then. So I prayed on it, and I said, God, if this is the life that's intended for me, show me what I'm to do. And God answered that prayer. It started to be where, just be honest. So I started to be honest with my customers. And although I wasn't making nearly the money that I was making before, I felt good about being honest with them. And my customers were respecting me. And I found a whole different level of clientele that were coming to me. I felt like the Lord was bringing me Christians, bringing me good people. And even though I wouldn't make a ton of money, they were sending me people, friends, family. Before I knew it, it was only a matter of, months before I didn't have to go searching for customers. The people that were the most honest and the ones that were coming to me that were Christians were referring me. They were sending their friends and families, go see this guy, he's a Christian. He's a good man, he's going to be honest with you. And, I thank God every day I'm not the person that I used to be.
An awesome testimony about what God can do, and He's able. There's no limits for God. And whatever situation you're in, don't worry about the situations. Just throw yourself into the hands of Jesus and say, here I am, Jesus, save me, forgive me, change me, I repent. And He will bring you up from that horrible pit of destruction, or from that prideful white horse you might be sitting on. There's so many ditches, but when we come to Jesus, He makes us humble, and He is going to make you humble. He's going to make you a loving person, and He's going to give you a new life and an eternal life. Until next time, stay blessed.